A young man is standing on a dirt road somewhere outside Cali, Colombia. It's 3 a.m. He's holding a duffel bag. And the guy who was supposed to meet him hasn't shown up, right? So now he's just standing there in the dark, in the middle of a country where thousands of people are killed every year over exactly what's in that bag. He doesn't know if the contact got arrested. He doesn't know if he's about to get robbed. He doesn't know if he's already being watched. What he does know is that the cocaine in that bag started its life on a mountain farm, and before it ends up in a nightclub bathroom in Amsterdam or a penthouse in New York, it has to survive the most dangerous logistics chain on the planet. And that's what this is about. Not the end users, not the high-level bosses. The route itself, because the route is where people die. Alright, so let's zoom out. Because to understand how dangerous this route is, you need to understand the scale of the system it operates inside. Cocaine production starts in South America, basically in 3 countries: Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. Most of it is Colombia, and from Colombia it has to get somewhere people will pay a lot of money for it, which mostly means the United States and Europe. The problem is, there are thousands of kilometers of ocean, jungle, border crossings, and law enforcement between point A and point B. So how do you move hundreds of tons of a product that's illegal everywhere it goes? You build a supply chain. Except instead of FedEx trucks and warehouse managers, your supply chain is made of armed gangs, corrupt officials, semi-submersible submarines, and a lot of people who are one bad day away from a shallow grave. American officials have actually called Ecuador a cocaine superhighway, and that framing is accurate. Up to 70% of the global cocaine supply moves through Ecuador at some point. Not produced there, just transited. Ecuador is basically the sorting hub, the distribution center, the fulfillment warehouse for a product that funds more violence per square kilometer than almost anything else on Earth. And when you hear that number, 70%, you have to stop and ask, how does a route that dangerous, that high profile, that heavily surveilled keep functioning? That's what nobody explains. So let's walk the route, step by step, because this is where it gets genuinely strange. Cocaine starts in the highlands of Colombia, right? And for a long time, the cartels moved it north, toward Mexico and then into the United States. That was the classic route. But law enforcement pressure shifted things. More surveillance on the Caribbean, more interdiction in the Pacific. So the network adapted, the way any supply chain adapts when one corridor gets expensive. It pushed south, into Ecuador. Cartels operating out of Colombia move product across the border into Ecuadorian territory, and then Ecuadorian gangs take over local distribution and export. And they're not moving it on donkeys. They're using speedboats, purpose-built semi-submersible vessels, and increasingly sophisticated concealment methods we're going to get to in a minute. The product goes out through Ecuadorian Pacific ports, and from there it fans out. Some of it heads north along the coast towards Central America and Mexico. Some of it crosses the Atlantic toward Europe. And here's the part that most people don't realize is Paraguay-Parana River system, which cuts through the interior of South America, has also become a major artery. Seizures linked to that system went up 5-fold between 2010 and 2021, according to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. 5-fold. In about a decade. That is not a gradual drift. That is a deliberate, rapid expansion of a trafficking corridor by organizations that are very good at logistics. The river system is like a hidden highway. No obvious checkpoints, no X-ray scanners. Just water, barges, and cargo that blends into legitimate river commerce. And because it threads through multiple countries, jurisdiction is fragmented. Nobody's fully in charge of policing it, which is exactly how traffickers want it. Now we get to the part of the route where the danger stops being abstract. Because once cocaine clears the South American coast and moves toward North America, it enters Mexican cartel territory. And that is a different category of dangerous. Mexican drug trafficking organizations dominate the import and distribution of cocaine into the United States. These aren't loosely affiliated street gangs, right? These are sophisticated transnational organizations with their own intelligence networks, their own military wings, their own corrupted government contacts. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the CJNG, operates across roughly 2/3 of Mexico and is considered one of the most aggressive trafficking groups in the world. When you put cocaine from South America into a system controlled by organizations like that, the price of failure is not getting fired. The price of failure is getting killed, or having your family threatened, or disappearing entirely. The US government has poured billions of dollars into security and counter-narcotics assistance targeting major cartel leaders since 2006, And yet, the flow hasn't stopped. What's happened instead is violence. Tens of thousands of homicides annually, year after year, as cartels fight each other for control of the corridors that cocaine has to move through. That young man standing on the road in Cali, by the time the product in his bag reaches this part of the route, it's passed through multiple sets of hands, crossed at least one international border, and generated enough money that organizations will kill each other to control the next leg. And when cocaine finally crosses into the United States, it doesn't just dissolve. Groups like the La Línea cartel follow the trail all the way from Mexico into cities like New York, maintaining distribution networks on American soil. The route doesn't end at the border, the route goes wherever the market is, and that market is massive. But there's a second destination, and in some ways it's even more sophisticated: Europe. And the entry point for a significant share of cocaine entering Europe is the port of Antwerp in Belgium. Now, if you're imagining a small harbour, stop. Antwerp is one of the largest ports in the world. It processes tens of millions of shipping containers every year. It runs 24 hours a day, every day, and it employs hundreds of thousands of people directly and indirectly. It is functionally a city inside a city, and that scale is the vulnerability. When you're moving that volume of legitimate cargo, the ratio of containers that can be physically searched is tiny. Traffickers figured this out a long time ago. The cocaine arriving in Antwerp from South America is almost always hidden inside legitimate commercial shipments: bananas, coffee, pineapples, tropical fruits with heavy, fragrant loads that can mask detection. The product is packed into the load in quantities that make the entire shipment valuable enough to organize crime around, but small enough, relative to the container's total volume, that a routine inspection might miss it entirely. And who handles those inspections? Dock workers, right? Which means traffickers have worked to compromise them. There have been documented cases of criminal networks recruiting people with legitimate access to port infrastructure, essentially turning insiders into extensions of the supply chain. The port becomes a seam in the armor of law enforcement, and that seam is exactly where the money flows through. When you think about cocaine arriving in Antwerp, don't picture a dramatic speedboat chase. Picture a forklift driver on a night shift, moving a pallet of fruit in a warehouse the size of a football stadium at 4 a.m. while nobody's watching. So let's talk about how the product actually travels, because this is one of the most overlooked parts of the whole story, and it's genuinely strange once you understand the scale of it. The trafficking organizations running this route aren't static. They're essentially running an R&D operation on concealment, continuously inventing new methods, testing them against law enforcement detection, and cycling to the next technique when one gets burned. Speedboats are the obvious one. Fast, hard to track at night, launched from remote coastal points. But speedboats get interdicted, so the next evolution was semi-submersible vessels. Boats designed to ride so low in the water that they're almost invisible to radar, and very hard to spot visually from a Coast Guard aircraft. They're uncomfortable, they're dangerous to operate, and the crew knows that if they get caught or cornered, still people crew them, because the payment is significant enough and the alternatives in those coastal communities are often worse. Beyond that, traffickers have moved into full submersibles, purpose-built underwater vehicles that cross portions of the Pacific essentially invisible. The cost of building one of those is enormous, which tells you something about the margins involved, right? That an organization would invest in a custom submarine to move product. Beyond maritime methods, there's concealment inside legitimate cargo, as we talked about with Antwerp. Hollowed out goods, double-walled containers, cocaine dissolved into liquids and re-extracted on the other end. The creativity, if you want to call it that, is relentless, and law enforcement is always one step behind, because they're reactive by definition. They can only catch methods they already know about. Every time a new technique gets identified and interdicted, the calculus shifts, and the next technique takes its place. The route adapts faster than the systems designed to stop it. That's the fundamental problem, and it's one the evidence suggests hasn't been solved. So here's where we come back to that young man on the road outside Cali, because his story doesn't end there, in the dark, with an empty road and an undelivered bag. The contact showed up 40 minutes late. They made the handoff. The bag moved to the next person, who moved it to the next. And by the time that cocaine completed the route we just described, it changed hands somewhere between 10 and 15 times. Each handoff is a transaction with its own risks. Each leg of the route is managed by a different set of people operating under different levels of pressure. The young man with the bag is replaceable. He knows it. The people above him know it. And that replaceability is exactly what makes the whole system function. Because if any individual gets caught or killed, the route continues. The cargo finds another carrier. The network is structured so that no single point of failure can stop it. That's not an accident. It's engineering. And when you understand that, you understand why disrupting this trade is so much harder than arresting the person holding the bag. Because the route is the real infrastructure. The people are just temporary vessels for a supply chain that's been running, in one form or another, for decades. The route doesn't care who you arrest. The most dangerous part of the cocaine trade isn't the violence, though the violence is real. The most dangerous part is how invisible the route itself has become, hidden in plain sight, inside legitimate commerce, inside port infrastructure, inside river systems that cross invisible national boundaries. It moves because the demand is relentless, and it survives because the profit makes it worth surviving. If this kind of supply chain criminology is interesting to you, the comments section is actually a good place to go deeper. Drop a question or a route you want covered next, because there are other corridors in this system that are just as strange and just as violent. Subscribe if you want more of this, because this channel goes exactly here. The logistics, the systems, the human cost behind stories that usually get reported as just another drug bust headline. You know what most people don't now. The route is the story.